Alien here. Robin Hood. Robin Hood. Robin Hood steals from the rich, gives to the poor. The rebel fighting tyranny alongside his band of merry men on behalf of the oppressed masses. The quintessential tale for the little guy, or elite-driven narrative. Join me as we dig in, exploring these and many other Robin Hood-related concepts.
Shall we take a peek at ourselves?
Scholarly pursuit of a real, historical Robin Hood in the 19th and 20th centuries of your Earth led to the development of a robust body of work and debate surrounding the topic of the legend. It is from much of this work I will pull. The first known reference to the man, this Robin Hood, is most often dated to your 14th century, to the narrative poem of Piers Plowman. In an allegorical vision of the 7 deadly sins, Sloth, represented by a priest, confesses that he is unable to repeat the Lord's Prayer, but can, however, rhyme of Robin Hood. Although fragments of a couple of tales dated to the 15th century have survived, it is in the form of the little gist of Robin Hood that we have your first full extant text of the hooded hero, consisting of a series of ballads dated to circa 1500, which notably places its protagonist in the forest of Barnesdale, not Sherwood, and situates him under the reign of a King Edward, not King Richard the Lionheart and Prince John. And it is in relation to a King Edward that we see the first fruitful efforts in finding a real Robin Hood.
I'm going to try and establish whether the most celebrated outlaw of all time was just a comic book character or a flesh and blood historical figure.
In court documents from Wakefield, scholars discovered property outside Barnesdale belonging to a Robert and Matilda Hood in a list of properties confiscated by the Crown after the Despencer War, the rebellion led by Thomas of Lancaster, beginning in 1321. If this is the Robin Hood from which the legend was born, with Marion being perhaps a close variation of Matilda, it would place him under the reign of Edward II, in direct association with this baronial revolt. Indeed, a number of other characters from the early ballads can also be traced to potential real-life counterparts from the same location and era. But additional scholars dismiss such documentation, especially in reference to the figure of Robin, as the name Robert or Robin, Hood, Hade, Hod, Hoda, or Hode, or however the hell your Middle English pronunciations go, appears to be a common Yorkshire name during the period.
90% of the population are peasants.
Some scholars point to the 14th century as the potential origin point of Robin Hood, at least when it comes to the literary figure. But some still remove him from the context of any civil war exclusively affecting the upper classes, such as the Despencer War, choosing instead to place him within the context of those social and economic grievances which affected the serfs and peasantry and ultimately culminated in the Peasants' Revolt of 1381.
I'm gonna cut your heart out with a spoon!
Such scholars argue that the sheriff, as Robin's principal enemy, fits well within this framework, as the sheriff was, during this period, the omnipresent representative of the power of government at the local level. Indeed, whatever the Robin Hood tale might have been before, it may in fact be this very Peasants' Revolt which came to define it in the 15th and 16th centuries and on, not as a legend for the peasantry or the poor, but as a tale for the elite gentry. The very fact that the tale survived in print form only just after the 14th century may itself be a testament to this possibility. Now, this Peasants' Revolt of 1381 is often latched onto today as an early example of a communist uprising. After all, what else could a peasant uprising aimed at the elites be, if not communist? Correct?
Filthy bastard commies! I hate them! I hate them! Ah!
The obvious problem, however, is that this revolt was not about the redistribution of wealth, replacing a profit-based economy, or banning private property. Quite the opposite. Chief amongst the peasants' goals was their inclusion directly into such systems of ownership and profit. What they wanted, if you will, was freedom from the bondage of a feudal system in which the lord could extort or indeed enslave the peasantry at a moment's notice. What they wanted was the ability to enjoy the full fruits of their individual labor.
So these are guys arguing for a free market, basically.
Well, they certainly wanted the freedom to trade as they chose, that's right.
And the third?
With England standing armies out of the country fighting the 100 Years' War, this revolt may very well have succeeded if it were not for one fundamental problem: its undying support of the king.
Dominant hierarchies.
Rather than targeting the entire monarchical system, the peasants attacked those within the royal government they believed betrayed their king,
Dominant hierarchy.
King Richard II. And, in short, the revolt was doomed to fail from its very start. After the king met with the rebels for a second time and managed to have the figurehead of the revolt, Wat Tyler, killed, he succeeded in suppressing the revolt, rescinding, of course, any agreements he was forced to make with the peasantry.
And what do you propose to do?
I'll organize revolt, exact a death for a death, and I'll never rest until every Saxon in this shire can stand up, free men, and strike a blow for Richard and England.
Notable to the topic at hand, as we will see, it is this same loyalty to the king to which Robin Hood typically adheres.
Traitor to the crown! That crown belongs to King Richard!
While it is often overlooked, even in A Little Jest of Robin Hood, the king forgives Robin and takes him into his service once he realizes he is a loyal subject.
And arise, Sir Robin of Locksley.
Similarly, the king of the potentially older, albeit fragmented, Robin Hood and the monk Ballad forgives Robin his misdeeds.
Oh, Friar Tuck, it appears that I now have an outlaw for an in-law. It's not bad.
Also important to note, while the gist does emphasize that Robin did poor men much good, it does not depict its protagonist stealing from the rich to give to the poor. In fact, the first recipient of this stolen money is a person of inherent status, a knight, albeit a destitute knight.
And what of the money?
Alas, my Lord Abbot, I have but a few pennies upon my person.
In that case, why did you bother to make the journey?
I had a question to ask. Would you give me more time to repay your loan?
But we both agreed on the time, a year and a day.
As in later versions of the tale, the principal target of Robin's thievery and violence are the sheriff, the sheriff's men, and the corrupt local clergy.
Count them, you conniving villains. I'd like to push every last piece down your rapacious throats.
Robin is also described as a yeoman in the gist. While the term is somewhat ambiguous in the 13th and 14th and even 15th centuries, it is likely that this designated him not as a serf nor wealthy peasant, but as an individual of free personal status. Indeed, perhaps a status least likely to worry the gentry in regards to any revolt or peasant uprising. But in some, the earliest known ballads acknowledge the corruption of local officials, but ultimately reinforce feudal class distinctions and the higher power of the king.
Prince John, you are defeated. In the name of His Majesty King Richard, I order you to surrender your arms.
Vile pest!
I have heard enough to hang each one of you 12 times over.
Whatever the exploits of the unknown Robin Hoods of old might have been, he seems either always to have been a figure supporting the ruling elite or to have been co-opted as such. While this might be a slight stretch, for the earliest known Robin Hoods, who are forgiven by the king in the end, but do not necessarily pledge full allegiance to him, he is certainly weak in his stance against the highest authority of the land. But the Robin Hood tale evolved, changing over time, becoming, in time, the same classic story you think of today. Steals from the rich, gives to the poor. This key development in the Robin Hood tale might be attributed to Historia Majoris Britannia, or History of Greater Britain, a 16th century text by the Scottish philosopher, theologian, and historian John Major. He would allow no woman to suffer injustice,
Your servant, Highness.
nor would he spoil the poor, but rather enriched them from the plunder taken from the abbots.
Hardly an inspiring sight for such pretty eyes as yours, I'm sure.
Major was also one of the first known authors or chroniclers to place the Robin Hood tale during the reign of King Richard the Lionheart. But here, of course, with this notion that he took from the rich and gave to the poor, some audiences get the idea that Robin Hood was a communist or socialist hero, fighting to redistribute the wealth.
I'm guessing you'd be up for a little redistribution of wealth?
Even the Texas state legislators, dubbed redistributionist laws, they put on the books in the late 20th century, laws which distribute taxes collected from wealthier school districts to poorer school districts, Robin Hood laws.
Without loyalty, there is no kingdom, there is nothing.
With such a reductionist view of the classical tale, we also get the criticism that Robin Hood is remembered not as a champion of poverty, but as a champion of need, not as a defender of the robbed, but as a provider of the poor.
The laws of this land enslave people to its king. A king who demands loyalty but offers nothing in return.
As this argument goes, he is the man who became the symbol of the idea that need, not achievement, is the source of rights, that we don't have to produce, only to want, that the earned does not belong to us, but the unearned does. He became a justification for every mediocrity who, unable to make his own living, has demanded the power to dispose of the property of his betters by proclaiming his willingness to devote his life to his inferiors at the price of robbing his superiors. Blah 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 blah, and until men learn that of all human symbols, Robin Hood is the most immortal and the most contemptible. There will be no justice on earth and no way for mankind to survive. Leaving the identity of the author of these arguments aside, the criticism ignores both the content and historical context of the classic tale. How can any individual elevate himself even to the lowest levels of mediocrity when his superiors, his ruling elite, tax him to the point of starvation? Suppressed of the ability to enjoy the fruits of his own labor, he can only produce, never earn. Such was the economic system of your feudal past, the systemic context for the tale which all too closely resembles your present-day Earth.
It was clearly a setup.
It was to be an outdoor restaurant.
We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
If we got to do it the violent way, then that's what we're going to do, because we're going to get answers one way or another.
But city officials were quick to point out some of those arrested are from out of state.
Federal investigators looking into the attack on January the 6th have been very busy.
The average price for a gallon of gas jumped more than 40% in the last year. That's according to AAA. Those rising fuel prices are causing a ripple effect across the U.S. economy. The expense trickles into everyday costs like shipping fees, lawn care, and of course, transportation.
Well, the Senate has passed a bill providing $40 billion in aid to Ukraine.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
In short, such criticisms or praise of the Robin Hood tale as you know it today ignores the lessons hidden beneath its surface.
I ordered you to take this castle.
Yes, my lord.
Well, take it. Bring it down and get my statue.
They surrender, and your statue is a rock.
I want it done.
There is no treasure.
Do it.
There are no soldiers in there, just some children and a mad old man.
And what is that to me?
If Robin Hood is such an immoral figure, it is not principally due to his actions, stealing from the rich to give to the poor. Or rather, that is, taking from those who have benefited from taxation to give back to those who have been taxed. Looking at the classic tale, it should be quite obvious that these actions are Robin's attempt, however reactionary, to solve a problem created not by the peasantry or the serfs, the needy, but created by the corrupt state.
But when my life was threatened, he proved himself my champion.
However, Robin becomes a clear immoral figure at the end of the tale when he turns his back on those he swore to protect, supporting instead the same system which allows, at a moment's notice, the taxation and enslavement of the peasantry. However gentle a bondage feudalism might be under the likes of a kindly King Richard,
Insolent dog!
When compared to an overbearing Prince John, it is all still restraint and theft of property nonetheless.
That's all you Saxons think about. Didn't I tell you it was for Prince John?
In the next installment, we will turn more explicitly to your 20th and 21st century adaptations of Robin Hood to cinema, television, and gaming. There we will find the same elite messaging with its themes of power, often centered on romanticized depictions of King Richard.
Give yourself up and no harm will come to you. Return into the service of your legitimate king.
Or, contrarily even, through deceitful means of criticism of the same monarchical figure.
Well, so it was a stone.
Then again, let's not forget about all the degeneracy of the tale.
Tell me, Master Higgs, what do you think of that?
Alien out.